Hello, listeners. Welcome to our English program podcast, Kaleidoscope. Listeners, present in our studio today is Vaibhav Walunj. Vaibhav is a distinguished policy professional with extensive experience in consultancy and project development through his organization Step 2, which is Sustainable Transformation of Education, Public Health and Policy. As a Chevening scholar, he pursued studies in governance, development and public policy at the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. Vaibhav's insightful writings on the intersection of policy, rights, identity and lawmaking have garnered numerous awards and accolades. Beyond his professional endeavours, Vaibhav is an avid traveller, having explored diverse corners of India and the world, offering unique insights into communities often overlooked. His journey includes significant contributions to national commissions such as Niti Aayog and legislative research within the Parliament of India. Moreover, his fieldwork research in remote areas such as South Kashmir, Bastar, Meghalaya and Gadchiroli exemplifies his dedication to understanding ground realities. Recently, Vaibhav completed a remarkable 3,000-mile journey across Africa, collaborating as a policy advisor with the National Assembly of Gambia in West Africa. Today, we delve into his remarkable journey, motivations and insights that he has gained along the way. So Vaibhav, firstly, welcome to our All India Radio studio.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. And it is such a privilege to be here with you and talk about this.
So Vaibhav, firstly, you recently embarked on a 3,000-mile journey across Africa. That is really interesting. We are going to talk about it and I'm really interested to know about your experiences. But however, before this expansive journey, you traversed another significant path, originating from a humble agrarian background in a small mountain hamlet. So could you share with us this journey from your village to where you are today? It will be inspiring for our listeners to know about it.
Sure. The place where I grew up, there was always very lack of opportunity to travel, to be curious and to explore some of the questions. I come from a agrarian family residing in a small village in the hamlet of Sahyadri, where traveling is a privilege. Or nobody would have thought of crossing the village or exploring some new paths, because the sort of generations are succumbed within the periphery of the villages. So I come from a small village called Walunj, also known as Ranmala, in Ambegaon or Ghotigaon sub-district of Pune, which is technically not very far from Mumbai if you're able to just slide down the Sahyadri. So the village is resided within the mountains, very spectacular view. And of course, then there is a lack of motivation to go outside and, travel to any new paths. So one of the motivations to come out of it was one of my few journeys to this city in Pune, where we used to get on the onion sacks, which were transported from my villages and going to the Gultikri market. And while you're sitting on the back of this tempo and you're watching the city lights and everything, it invokes some of the inspiration for you to take up new journeys, to look at new avenues, what life could offer. And unfortunately, some of the shackles, they did not bind me and many people of my generation within the periphery of the villages. So I'm a third person who graduated from my village. And coming from there, I always wanted to explore a new path, because I always thought there is a sort of backlog from generations that I have to cover on. So that just made me a bit curious than others and explore my interests through the traveling more and more, which took me to different places. And there was always a motivation when you see some of the problems that your paths are facing, some of the challenges within the health and education. Being a first generation learner, are sort of faced with very different challenges, and you always seek solutions to it. So how any of these travels or solutions that you come across can be implemented in your region, that's always a motivational factor, which is a thing ongoing in your head all the time. And that took me to the different places. And one of it is Africa and my education abroad as well. So that's what motivated me throughout my journey.
Really interesting journey. So your curiosity, journey and interest in policy seems deeply intertwined. So what motivated your interest in policy making? How do you associate traveling with this passion?
So when you look at the history of human civilization or history of our country as well, we have known that history through the accounts of travelers. And many of the problems, you can define them as problems only if you travel to new places and get to know that this is not the way of ideal living at all. These are the problems and you can solve them. So I always associate visiting new places and learning from those experiences, seeing your life from a different point of view, a different vantage point, and then many of the solutions to your problems naturally come to you. I often cite the concept of organic intellect of people. When some of the people get some cultural exchange through other vantage point, they always think of some of the solutions to their ongoing problems. Being from a geography cladded with all of the problems or navigating our path through this increasingly globalized and hence complex world, I always thought looking at new places, exploring new solutions and keeping your mind curious gets you done some of the things that you cannot do. One of the examples that I could give is traditionally the way of solving problems within villages. It's just getting around some of the old people, old folks, your grandfathers, and asking them, how would you have done it in your time?
Right.
However, you rely on the expertise of those people that has came from their own individual experiences and some of the things that they have seen through their life.
Right.
And through the means of transportation or education, you often get exposed to the variety of places. Through the traveling, be it for the religious purpose or other things, you explore these new things and you try to implement them within your life to solve these problems. So when I was navigating through the problems that are faced by my villages, I always thought traveling could be one of the way that can take us out of those problems and give us solutions. And policy making, sort of working with the government, private and media institutions was this way of me to travel and find those solutions.
Wow, that's great. So Vaibhav, you are the third person you said to graduate from your village. So what was your graduation in, and like how do you decide that like policy is going to be your thing?
It wasn't really the first thing that you think of when you come out of a village. But I see it as good amalgamation of science, culture, and going to the depth of your existence. I look at policy as a branch of science. I like to term it as policy sciences, where you come together, deliberate, and struggle to find out a common answer within the masses.
Right.
Which is a very scientific process if you see a few of the people coming together, working on something and getting to the solutions. So my graduation recently from Institution of Development Studies was in Development and Public Policy, which was focused specifically on third world countries, of how these countries are navigating in the era of globalization through some of the problems that have been persistent throughout their history and some of the problems that are newly generated within their economies. Choosing policy making as a sector to work in is in that way comes as a natural choice, because none other sector gives you that opportunity to go across the field, to have an interdisciplinary approach and to understand complex communities and cultures like India or Africa. So for example, if I have to solve a problem of any public health issues faced by unhospitalized deliveries of women within my village, there's not only problem of medical solutions to it, or there is not only problem of transportation or transport for it, but the problem has to deal with firstly through the mindset, where you have to apply some psychology. Secondly, you have to provide the means of communication and transport, and then thirdly, you have to build on some of the infrastructure, and yet you cannot be sure that the problem can be solved.
Right.
Which is the sector which you think can deal with all three issues at the same time? That's where I think policy making is actually comes from. Now it has become umbrella term for everything literally that's happening anywhere. But through my senses, it is the field through which you are engaging with the communities in order to find answers to the persistent questions that are faced by literally everyone around you. And that's what motivated me to pursue policy making, in order to solve the small problems that I was seeing around while growing up.
Wow. It's very well answered, Vaibhav, actually. talking about policies, so you went from your small village to Europe for studying. So while studying there also as an international student in the UK, many individuals opt to explore neighboring European countries, the United States, or developed regions like Dubai. So, like, what inspired you to choose Africa for your extensive journey? Like, especially considering its unique challenges and also opportunities.
That's a really interesting question. I think there were four factors that I thought of before going to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it was always a dream to go to Africa. I mean, through my reading or throughout the history of southern India, sort of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Deccan, we have had African people coming here
Right.
and working with us for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of Habshis coming to Maharashtra and, starting their own empire over here. So this history of India and Africa relation, it goes back.
Mm.
Going to Africa is often termed as going back to Africa. You never really go to Africa, as in because roots of humans or civilization were started from there.
Right.
So there is one ongoing culture of like, let's go back somewhere, and I was studying concepts as decolonization and post-colonial studies as well. And Africa had provided some of the very unique answers where you can avoid fundamentalism and yet
Okay.
decolonize the world. And of course, while studying in UK, I was working with some of the organizations which were helping young refugee students at small age who had crossed Africa and many other continents to reach to Europe in order to get away from the conflicts. And while talking to them, I was always wondering what that journey was like.
Mm-hmm.
How about traveling the same path in opposite way and understanding some of the things that they were going through?
Okay.
So the migration of these students, these young people who are coming from different parts of Africa, was one of the major concerns that I was constantly facing with while working with them through some charities and organizations with the Brighton City Council. And I decided to do this journey backwards in order to understand that part. But I'm sure that emotions and my learnings and sort of tracing those roots in present time was one of the motivation. But the motivation at that specific point was the unfortunate incident happened in Morocco, the earthquake that happened,
Yes.
that triggered some spark within me that I thought it might be a good place for me to be where I can contribute more, and I decided to embark on this journey.
Great. So, could you elaborate more on the preparations you undertook before embarking on this 3,000-mile journey? Like, were you hitchhiking? Were you accompanied by anyone during the certain parts, or did you navigate the journey solo?
That was one of the most difficult things to organize this journey, because often, however you plan such long journeys, they never go as per the plans.
Yes.
The biggest help that I got were from the African students and diaspora within England and UK, who helped me extensively in order to prepare for this journey. Through Chevening Network, there were many alumni, there were many students from these countries who were studying in UK with me.
Okay.
And interactions with them helped a lot in order to prepare for what is going to come. As a native Marathi speaker, my French is very Greek, so I had to take few of the lessons before embarking on this journey. I had decided, of course, with my constrained budget, not to use any hotels on the way. So I had to sleep within campsites, within camps and tents, or often out under the sky while going on this journey. And yet I have to be safe. I have to be at the safer places and manage my food and other habits accordingly. So before going on this journey, I read a lot of travel documents, a lot of travel experiences, and books regarding the travel. So there comes explanatory books about the travel journeys within different countries. I went through all of them. I talked to many people who had traveled recently through Africa and through West Africa and North Africa particularly. I contacted many Chevening community members who were living in these countries after their courses, and I contacted them of how I can get some help from them when I was going through this. And the last part was just relying on the local people more. Because often you try to plan everything from your perspective,
Right.
but it's always great to know how the people living in these communities, in these geographies, are navigating through this journey and travel on their own. So they have been the biggest knowledge bank from me, and from them, and thanks to their help, I was able to complete this journey totally.
Wow, that's great. So Vaibhav, we are coming towards the end of our first part. We'll end this part with your aim in covering this diverse regions was to observe people, right? Their cultures and connect these experiences with policies. So like, can you share the countries you visited and some of your key observations and learnings from each?
Studying policy making and development sort of had made my vision to understand these geographies and culture through the lenses of policy. In order to understand them better, you go through their histories and interact with them in such a way that how they can help you to navigate through their problems and find solutions through their lenses. Few of the key observations within first part of my journey when I embarked is Africa is not what you think it is. Africa is not a country, and it is as diverse as India when you go through it.
Right.
The people are very passionate in order to help you. Often there are many obstacles in order to communicate with them, but once you are in sync with them, a new possibility of life, a different vision towards the development policy or the life itself widens and opens in front of you through these experiences. So that was one of the things that I firstly observed within Africa. Another thing that I learned from this journey was living your personal and professional life at the fullest, no matter how difficult the existence and experiences within your home countries are. So while I was traveling through Morocco, Western Sahara, or which people like to call as Sahara only, Senegal, Mauritania, and finally Gambia, these are some of the countries that are facing multilateral challenges at present and who are traveling through a very different path of democracy, policy, and a general public life in itself. Most of these countries are facing very diverse set of problems that none other countries in the world are facing. Understanding the life of the people and yet how they have maintained their commitment towards overcoming these problems, finding newer solutions and advanced way of navigating through different challenges such as poverty, lack of education, increasing and immense migration to Europe, employment. And yet, in some or other way, they have refrained from becoming a fundamental entity or going through opposite path within their histories, and developing their economies and their daily life forward was one of the way that I think is a very great learning for India. As an Indian, I always thought going to Africa would be a different and diverse experience, and I would be unknown to everyone around me. But wherever I had went, just once when people knew that I was Indian, I was hurled with words like, "Hey, Salman Khan," or any random Bollywood film name. And then they would talk to me for hours and hours about the films that they had seen.
Wow.
In whichever language possible.
That is a connecting factor, our films.
That's when I realized that these small things which we take for granted are such a soft power that we have.
Right.
Which is very easy icebreak. So few of the European travelers who were traveling alongside, there is large community of overland travelers who are going through Africa, and you're never really alone because there is someone always traveling with you. So with few people I was hitchhiking. They find it really hard to break that ice with African person that they encounter, which on other part was so easy for me that they were ready to talk for hours with me and share their culture and amalgamate. So I guess that gave me a really great advantage in order to go over. But while crossing the borders, I found it really difficult for any Indian to navigate through the border rules or the security concerns, because you're always seen as a suspicious person, because not many Indians are traveling through the borders of Africa. And hence you have to be very careful and explain yourself to the fullest. To some extent, having any European face around you really help you to get that stamp on your passport. But otherwise, the experience from common people was always enchanting, and it really fills your heart with joy and curiosity.
Wow. The sparkle in your eyes, Vaibhav, when you speak about Africa, it's just something else. And I hate to do this, but we'll have to wind up our first part here due to lack of time. But it was great listening to you about your hitchhiking journey through the Sahara Desert. And we are going to continue this. I hope our listeners are enjoying this. They'll find this interesting. So thank you so much for joining in, Vaibhav, for this episode. And see you in the next part.
Thank you so much.